Today on the podcast, my very special guest, Chess Grandmaster, glass ceiling breaker, life philosopher, the one, the only, Maurice Ashley. Welcome to the Art of Excellence. In the words of Aristotle, excellence is never an accident. It is always the result of high intention, sincere effort, and intelligent execution. I am your host, Glenn Zweig. Join me now as I dive into the lives and careers of world-class entrepreneurs, athletes, entertainers, scientists, thought leaders, and explorers to uncover the ingredients to their extraordinary accomplishments. My guest today is Maurice Ashley. Maurice is a chess grandmaster, a chess commentator, a national championship coach, and an author. In 1999, he earned the title of Chess Grandmaster, making him the first African American Grandmaster in the game's history, and was later inducted into the U.S. Chess Hall of Fame. His latest book is titled Move by Move: Life Lessons on and Off the Chessboard. Maurice, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So for the last maybe 3 or 4 minutes, knowing that you were coming on, I take these interviews really seriously. I've got nerves, and I sort of calm myself down by doing deep breaths. I do laps around the office just to sort of, get it out of me. And so by the time you jump on here, I'm feeling calm and relaxed and in the zone, so to speak. So what do you do when you've got, or when you had in the past, a really, really big consequential match? What would you do going into the match to get yourself in the right space?
Well, you don't have to be nervous talking to me. I'm not the boogeyman.
I'm nervous with anyone because I want to get it right.
And I think that that's the key right there, is the idea that we have to get things right. We feel like there's an end result that we have to hit. And if we don't hit that end result, then whatever happened doesn't matter. And I guess, we have performance metrics at work and in school, certainly you get graded. And it's an unfortunate structure that increases that pressure on us. I understand that results matter, but the fact that you have to have this great result, regardless of what you do, is what adds that additional pressure. So for me, I also suffered nerves, of course, and I think nerves are a part of wanting to do well, and everybody has nerves, no matter who they are. So things like breathing, things that get you back to your normal state. What is our normal state, right? It's the state we have when we're just chilling, watching TV, talking to friends. We want to be in a normal state in terms of our heart rate. But there is the issue as well of, as when you're about to perform, we don't want you in couch potato state, because if you got no pulse, if you're just sitting back, you're not going to be able to be an elite performer. So it's important also that you have some of that energy in your body, some of that nervous energy. It allows you to fight and not flight, right? Even flight as well if you need it.
Yeah.
So what is more than a technique to tell people is a mindset. And that mindset is that you cannot be better than yourself. You can't be better than yourself. I mean, maybe one day you'll seemingly outperform yourself for whatever reason, which you would normally do, but that's still within the range of your performance, of your ability to perform, right? You are not going to jump suddenly like Michael Jordan because you set your mind to it, unless you're already an elite performer. You're not going to do better than yourself, than your training, than everything that you have done to get to the stage you're at. But what you can do is underperform yourself. You can be worse than normal because of nerves, because of fear, because that day you didn't eat right, you didn't sleep right, you didn't do all the normal things that keep you at an elite level. And so the first thing that I like to remind myself of is I'm good enough. I'm good enough. I'm here. There's a reason why I'm here. It's because I'm good enough. And if I'm good enough, then I just need to hit that metric. I just need to be that. So I really ought to forget about pressure, forget about nerves, forget about the result, and just remember, be me, and it's going to be okay. And if I can remind myself and convince myself that being me alone is going to be okay, then I'm going to perform well. And and if I don't, it's just the luck of that day. But that's not something I'll have control over. What I can control is just being myself. And that's a mantra I like to tell myself just before I go into any big performance.
Be myself. We'll come back to all of these techniques because you have a whole number of them in this book. But wanted to talk about Queen's Gambit for a second. So was curious why you think it became such a cultural sensation, and not just here in the U.S. but all over the world. And it's not like it was a hit just for chess players. It was a hit for non-chess players, people that never even played the game, and it became so popular overnight, the show and the game, that you couldn't even buy a chess set. All the stores were sold out. So what do you think was behind that?
It was more of a hit for non-chess players than it was for chess players. Even though the
Yeah.
chess players, let's get that clear.
Okay.
It was really well done. It explored the world of chess, which is a game that people are fascinated by. The non-chess players, chess is this cultural touchstone. It's such a great game that they've always wanted to learn, but they couldn't really get into because they had all these stereotypes about the game. For one, it's boring, it's slow, it's going to be uninteresting, but especially it's just too complicated. I can't get into something that's too complicated. And the series was able to take away the ultra complicated side of chess and just focus on the drama, which was huge, was intense. You could always cut it with a knife. That's what's sitting there, the chessboard, trying to figure out that next move and knowing that if you make a mistake, boom, you're going to die. Also, having a compelling character, because here was a woman in a male dominated chess space that no one expected to do well. And she pulled it off magnificently. In addition to which, she had her own flaws. She had clear flaws in her character, and we got to watch her overcome those flaws as she ascended and transcended this space that she didn't belong.
Do you remember how there were these scenes where she would be lying down, looking up at the ceiling, and she
Sure.
would see all of these chess moves happening,
Mhm.
in her mind, but she would visualize it on the ceiling. Anything like that ever happen to you? Do you have these visualizations where you can't shake it out of your head?
It's not a question of can't shake it out. You don't want to shake it out. I mean, we as chess players, it's just something that's natural. When you get to a certain level, you can just play blindfolded, and the moves are just there. You see them when I speak to another grandmaster. We don't need the actual board position in front of us. We just start talking chess moves, and we'll say pawn to e4 and knight to f6, and that's an Alekhine's defense. All right, so what happened next? E5, knight d5, c4, knight b6, d4, d6. All right, main line. Let's go. And we just talk like that, and I'm watch as we're talking. We're seeing the moves go in our minds. And I've played as many as 10 games simultaneously blindfolded against opponents in exhibitions, and they just have to call out their moves and got it in my head. Now, 10 may sound really impressive, and it's a good number, but the record is 47.
Right, right. But even 10, even one, how do you have 10 chessboards with all the different pieces and all the different places all stuck in your head? How does one do that?
Well, the human mind is built for that kind of performance.
No, no, not this one over here.
No, absolutely, absolutely. But for me, it's chess. For you, it may be something else. Let's let's talk sports. Let's talk basketball, my favorite sport. If you were to say to LeBron James, all right, what I want you to do is I want you to watch 10 basketball games on a screen. just 10, watch 10 games on a screen. And what we're going to do, you're not watching them all at once. Like you're not just like looking at, you can't see all 10 at the same time, but we're going to freeze. All right, this screen, what's going on? And LeBron will look at the game and he'll see the passes and he'll see what plays were made, right? And they're like, okay, that game is that game. I know what's going on. Okay, now let's switch to another game. LeBron will be able to switch. It's like switching channels. He'll switch channels. And then when he comes back to the first game, he'll tell you where the game was, what was happening, what play was made, because he's a maestro at the game. So he's going to remember everything that happened in that game. And I've seen LeBron do it after games where he'll tell you almost down to the minute what happened in a game.
Maurice, but he's not blindfolded. You're forgetting this little part. You're blindfolded. You don't have any eye contact on these boards. It's all in your head.
Okay. So this is a very big point because the game is a story. The game tells a story. Whatever is happening in the game, it's not just moves, it's a story. And the human mind is particularly good at telling stories and retaining stories. So if I started a story with you about a pink elephant that decided that it wanted to play basketball. And so it goes out onto the plains, right? And it tells all its friends, I want to learn to play basketball. And all his friends laugh at it. You want to play basketball? Are you crazy? Okay, freeze that story. Now we're going to talk about a green mouse that wants to be an elephant. And I can start telling you about the green mouse that wants to be an elephant. And then I'll come back to the pink elephant, right? That wants to play basketball. If friends are laughing about it. You're following my story. You're like, okay, I got that story. And you have thousands of stories in your head. You have memorized so many tales. We can go through the history of movies you've watched, stories you told from your friends. And the human mind is very capable of visualizing it all. So for me, chess is such a dramatic story. It's like the pink elephant and the green mouse. It's like Cinderella. It's like Snow White. It's that fresh when a game starts because every move is not disconnected from an idea, from a story of that game. The person played a move that, Bobby Fischer played that move back in 1972. I know because I went over that game and it was amazing. And I happen to remember the game. Anybody who's a student of anything can visualize it in their minds because that's what the brain does. And you just have to be good or obsessed enough to want to be good at that thing in order for it to be something that you could do in your head, blindfold, or in your sleep.
Okay, well, easier easier said than done. Put it there, but it's impressive.
But you're thinking chess. You're thinking chess. And I guarantee if I told you we're just going to do stories, you'd have a different attitude.
It's the context. And for you, like you said, the chessboard is a story in itself.
Yes, it is.
So I want to go back to the early years with you. You were 2 years old, I think. Your mother left you, left your siblings, all in Jamaica. She came to the U.S. in hopes of providing a better life for all of you. It would be, I think, a decade before finally she was able to bring you where you could emigrate to the United States. So your grandmother basically raised you in Jamaica for a big chunk of your childhood. I know in the long run it all worked out, but that's pretty traumatic for a kid. You think there were abandonment issues?
There were definitely abandonment issues. Absolutely. My brother was 10. I was 2. My baby sister, Alicia, was 7 months old. And so I really can't imagine for the 2-year-old me, I can't remember that far back, what it meant when my mother went on that plane on April 3rd, 1968, and left. And for me to say goodbye at that moment, I don't know the tears that I cried. I don't know the reaction that I had. I still had my grandmother and I still had my brother and sister. I still had my uncles. So my mother leaving, it was hard to remember what the trauma was like. But I do know that as I grew up, I understood that my friends had their mothers around, had their parents around even, and I didn't. And there were times when you get a good grade at school. I was a very good student, so I get good grades. And there was no mom around to say, wow, that was awesome. Or when I was upset about something that I wanted to share with you, naturally a kid wants to cry on your mom's shoulder or in her lap. and she wasn't there. And so I felt that. I felt that very keenly.
Hmm.
And it's something that really followed me throughout my adult life, even when I thought that it was resolved when we finally got to live together again when I was 12. It took me many years later, before I finally resolved it when I confronted her on this topic after I had my own child. And that was just a shock for me to think about how could this woman have left her children? Like, I couldn't leave my daughter for 10 months, much less 10 years. Like, how is that even possible? And she explained it really well. She said she suffered during that time period. While I was wallowing in self-pity, she had to leave her 3 children behind because she wanted a better life for them. She wanted to raise them out of deep poverty. And that was the way she saw was the way out. And, when she came to this country, April 3rd, I mentioned 1968, the very next day was April 4th, 1968, when Dr. King was shot and killed in Memphis, Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
And that was devastating. Like, here she came to this line of opportunity. She wants to change fortunes of her children, and the country goes on fire, like complete division, hate, violence. But she toughed it out. Right at that moment, she said, I can't go back now. I can't run away. I have to do this for my kids. And so she soldiered on. And when I understood the deep love it took to make that sacrifice, and because I had a kid, it wasn't just about separating from it. What are you ready to sacrifice for this baby? And then I got it. It's not, my mother did an amazing thing.
Hmm.
And that cleaned out and cured all the abandonment issues for me, and connected us in a profound way.
Hmm. Well, whether it was your mother or your grandmother, there's this fierce competitive streak in the family. You're not the only driven one. Your brother, I think, was a 3-time kickboxing champion.
World kickboxing champion, yes.
World kickboxing champion. And your sister won, I think, 6 world titles in boxing.
Correct.
So they were the jocks, and you were the family nerd. Is that the gist of
Yeah,
it?
that's exactly that's how it stacks up. I mean, I was definitely very physical. I've always been fashion myself an athlete, but that's my performance, or what I ended up doing, was very much in the line of mental athlete rather than
Mm-hmm.
physical athlete. And yeah, I have 2 extraordinary siblings. Actually, I have 2 other siblings on my father's side
Mm-hmm.
who never won world titles, but my middle brother, Anthony, he's a black belt in karate, was in the Marines, so very much a high performer. And the big sister, Cheryl, of the family, she was the one who went into business and had 3 kids, and may seem like the normal one. But if you sit at the dinner table and we start playing board games, she's the biggest trash talker of all of us. So it's super funny how competitive we all were. My dad was also very competitive. We didn't live with him because they had separated so early,
Mm-hmm.
but we would visit him on the weekends. He moved to the U.S. as well, and we would visit him on the weekends. And he was a card shark, and like dominoes extremely well. He could tell what was in your hand based on how the game was going. He would just start telling all of us what our last cards were. You think about me playing blindfold. I got a lot of that from him, the ability to just
Hmm.
analyze, see how a person thinks, follow their train of thought. So our whole family really is super competitive.
Hmm. Well, I was trying to find some thread in terms of explaining it. And you mentioned that your grandmother used to say to you, maybe the others as well, over and over, Jack of all trades, master of none. So it sounds like she wasn't really wanting you to explore the world so much as to focus in one area and really master it. So was she the one that was pushing you really hard, pushing your siblings to pick a lane?
Well, she was definitely a tremendous woman. She had 7 children of her own. 2 of them passed away very early in their childhood. She raised those kids, and she was a teacher, and she was a student of life. And so that mantra, which I really hated hearing, I just like hated it because I was interested in a lot of things. But as you said, she really wanted you to pick a lane. That was the world of success to her, that you pick a lane and you, in very determined fashion, go after it. And so, yes, that was a huge lesson we learned at her knee. Of course, we learned the idea of sacrifice and determination as well from her and my mother, my dad, who I didn't really, I discounted his influence on my growth until much later. You know, you come to understand these things only when you're grown.
Mm.
But he was a dancer. I called him a card shark, but actually his profession was dancing. After being an accountant, by the way, he took up dance very late in life
Hmm.
and in his 20s. He was always a good dancer, but then he turned into a professional dancer when someone spotted his talent and said, "What are you doing crunching numbers? You know, you should be in this field." And he ended up dancing for Martha Graham, the Martha Graham Dance Company, and then traveled the world doing dance. So we had fantastic role models, I think, success around us, and people who were driven, that's the word. They were driven to do something and refuse to give up on it. And we saw that. My grandmother gave that, but no, there's no one explanation usually.
Yeah.
You've got multiple examples around you, and that really reinforced it for us.
Yeah. I think you were 14 years old when you first got exposed to chess,
Correct.
which sounds young, but it's almost over the hill in terms of competitive chess, right?
Yes, actually, I was first exposed to chess when I was about 8 or 9 in Jamaica,
Oh, okay.
where we played a lot of board games in Jamaica. So we played dominoes and this board game Ludo, which is a very special game for us in Jamaica. You name it, cards. We'd play any board game because television wasn't a big thing way
Mm.
back then. But I didn't really play that much. It was one of the games. It was when I was 14 in Brooklyn Technical High School where I saw a friend of mine playing the game, and I was like, yeah, I'm great at board games. I'm a smart kid. And I played him and he just demolished me. It was not even close. And I didn't understand it at all. And then I ended up, very luckily, saw a book in the library and it was like, oh, there are chess books? That's it. And the competitive side came out, grabbed the book, studied it, went back to play my friend, and he crushed me again. And it turns out that he had read that book and a bunch of other books. And that started the real love affair with the game. But later, I would find out very soon later that kids who become grandmasters usually pick it up at around 6, 7, or 8 years old because chess is very much like a language, and exposure to it early is beneficial.
Hmm.
Just the way a kid could pick up 2, 3, 4 languages as long as you expose it to them early without any real effort. They'll just start picking it up as long as they're in the environment. That's how chess is. So I had a lot of catching up to do, but fortunately, I was so hooked, so obsessed that I just studied all the time. To me, it was my college degree, if you will, and I
Yeah.
had to just keep studying and studying because I wanted to get that good.
Yeah. So look, I don't want to stereotype, but I'm guessing there weren't too many African American role models in chess to emulate.
Actually, there were a ton of African American role models, but not at the highest level.
Not at the highest levels.
That's important. Not at the highest levels. There were no grandmasters, so there was nobody to look up to in that way. But in my neighborhood in Brooklyn, there were players who, first of all, played chess in the parks, who were not professionals in the chess ranks, but were professional trash talkers. So it was always entertaining to go to the park and play chess, and these guys are trash talking and playing music and just having a great time. So at least it was a group to go to. And then even more special was a group of largely African Americans in a school, in a place they called, it wasn't even a place. It's a school without four walls. They called the Black Bear School. And the Black Bear School was this group who studied chess seriously. And they called it the Black Bear School because their mantra was, if you see a black bear in a forest, you must kill it. Because if you don't, it'll just keep on coming. And that was their warrior spirit, warrior attitude. So I had those guys to fight. I was just a teenager playing against these grown men, but they saw that I had talent. But the way they taught you is by kicking your ass. Like, it wasn't sitting there, we're going to show you
Mm.
moves. No, we're going to beat you to death. Then you go home and study, and you better bring it next time. And so those gentlemen, many of who have passed on, and thanks to them, truly I am who I am today.
But just to go back to this point, because I think it's an important one, there were no African American role models at the highest levels. There were no African American chess grandmasters
Correct.
because you became the first one.
Hmm.
Now, some kids might say, oh, if you want to reach the highest levels, and whatever group you identify with, and maybe that's not the group that you do, but whatever group you identify with, a lot of kids would say, oh, well, if no one in my group that I associate with has gotten to that level, it must not be for me. I must pick some other area, pick another lane, back to that earlier part of the conversation. But it didn't seem to deter you at all.
Yeah, there is the reality that if you don't see it, you can't conceive it. But I wasn't about the group. I
Hmm.
for me, it was about trying to beat people.
Hmm.
Like, this is the thing that I was in love with, and I was trying to beat people. So I didn't have to identify after that with somebody who looks like me in order for me to get to my goal, which is I want to crush you. Like, I don't want to lose to the people around me. I don't want to lose to my friend at school who I eventually beat. I don't want to lose to the guys in the Black Bear school who I also eventually beat. Then when I went to the chess clubs and those guys were winning against me, I didn't want to lose to them. All I wanted to do was beat whoever I sat in front of. And once I started finding out about grandmasters, that there were higher levels of play, that's it. I want to be like this group. Like, that was my group, grandmasters. I want that title. And so, as much as people around me, when I started getting near that level, I mean, trust me when I tell you, African American chess players were looking at me like, "Hey, man, you got to do it for us. Check
Hmm.
that for us, right?" Like, that was what I'm trying to do this for myself. That pressure really built up
Yeah.
in me to want to perform, and I understood the sentiment because African Americans, generally speaking, are not thought of as high intellectuals. Many examples as we have, but overwhelmingly, what the media show is the athletes, right? The musicians, the performers. And rarely do you see the many examples of African American intellectuals performing in quietly, where the writers, the astrophysicists, of course, Neil deGrasse Tyson, many people know.
He was on the show here.
Right. I mean, those examples I also knew, right? I knew those are role models for me. So I knew that there was representation in that space. Chess just happened to be an intellectual activity that we hadn't broken into yet, but I was fully confident that I'd be able to get to that level. Confidence is not the right word. I had to. It was necessary that I get to that level. Otherwise, my life's purpose wouldn't have been achieved.
Hmm. Why did you attach your life's purpose to this?
Uh, chess, it's a I wanted to say it's a cruel taskmaster. I don't think that's the fair way of putting it, but it's true. I mean, it finds its devotees. Chess is a game that's been around for 1500 years in various forms, and there are those who it's like the game knows you're one of us.
Hmm.
You're going to be in this part of the party. You have to play this game. So I was hooked on it. I was obsessed by it. I had to do it, and every grandmaster will tell you the exact same story. It's the same thing. They were just hooked. They had to get good, and so the game just finds its devotees. And
Hmm.
I knew I was a slave to the game, and I still am. I can't get out. I can't get over it. I no longer compete. I no longer even do commentary. I write about it, as you know, I've written about my books. I speak to corporate audiences, but every day I'm on my phone and there's an app on my phone. It's a chess app, and I'm either checking the latest chess news or I'm creating a chess puzzle to get my students or the general chess public. When I
Yeah.
post on Twitter, here's another puzzle. It's in.
Can't escape it. Let's get into dissecting the game a little bit. And to illustrate the complexity, you mentioned this, which I found fascinating, which is that after each player makes one move, there are 400 different possible positions. After two moves each, 72,000 possible positions, 9 million after three moves, and then close to three. I think 288 or 290 billion after 4 moves. It's just unfathomable. So it essentially debunks the myth that elite players are able to calculate 5, 10, 20 moves ahead with every single position. And I think your point of this is that there are just simply too many permutations to do that. And therefore, you have to end up relying way more on intuition than you do on brute force, on memorization and calculation. Could you talk about that?
Intuition plays a role, a large role. And don't get me wrong, we as chess players, we are able to calculate 5, 10, 20 moves ahead. But those are in very narrow corridors. Important to note that there are some positions where moves are absolutely forced. There's nothing else to do. In the game of chess, if I check your king, you must respond to that check. The king is under attack, something must be done. And because of that constraint, I can look at the board and say, well, maybe your king can move to the left or he can move to the right. There's only two things to do. Let me see if I can check you again. And so I can keep calculating down these very restricted lines where you have to follow the rules of the game. You have really no option but to do that. So it's very easy to calculate, easy for a grandmaster to calculate many moves ahead within that small window. And I could teach you how to do, okay, maybe not 20 moves, but certainly a set number of moves, because you'll be going, okay, you can only move left or right. Like, so I just need to look at those two. But in the vast majority of situations, it's not like that. It's, I got to move, and you have about 5 different reasonable replies. And if I start trying to analyze your 5 different reasonable replies with my 5 different reasonable replies, to which you will now have another 5 reasonable replies around every single ply, my brain explodes. Nobody's doing that. So what we have on our side, we have experience. We played so many games. We know what good moves look like. We have intuition. We can also be imaginative and creative in moments and play a move that may throw your opponent off. But very importantly, we have understanding. That's what we really have. We have understanding. We know that there are certain things that make sense and other things that don't. And I can smell a fishy move a mile away. As soon as it lands on the board, I don't even have to look twice. I just see the move and I go, that can't be right. Like, that just looks dumb. I haven't calculated a move yet, but the move either doesn't control the center of the board, which is the most important part of the board you want to control. It doesn't protect your king. It takes a piece offside, which means that it won't be able to work harmoniously with the rest of the forces. So that one is a particular glaring one. And it's easy to spot, right? Like, if all our pieces are in the sector, critical sector, everybody, the fight is right here, and one of your pieces wanders off, you go, what is that? You must be either a genius or incredibly stupid that the battle is being waged on this front right here. And you took one of your pieces and sent it all the way on the other side of the board. So I'm going to inspect it just to make sure what's the sense. But then I'll say, okay, you are being stupid today. And then it's on. So because of we have thousands of those little heuristics, right? Little methods and little signposts that tell us when a move makes sense or not, because we have enough of them in our heads, we don't really need to calculate everything in depth, because your sirens will start blaring when you see an ugly move. And you'll say, and ugly is the right word for chess players, by the way. Yeah, that's ugly. Oh, no. Oh, no. I have to punish that move because it just doesn't make any sense. That's what we rely on most.
I want to talk about this notion of a beginner's mind, because you say this is really important in chess. And that is the ability of the most elite chess players to see the board through a beginner's eyes, as if looking at it for the very first time, to see everything with a fresh perspective. So when you're one of the best in the world, when you've played tens of thousands of games over your career, how do you go about cultivating a beginner's mind?
Cultivating the beginner's mind first comes from cultivating the beginner's attitude. Okay? And recognizing that everything you're looking at, you don't really see perfectly. perfection is not something we're aiming for. And we'll say, oh, nobody's perfect. Yeah, you're right. Not even the best players aren't perfect. I don't care who they are. And if you humble yourself to the richness, the possibilities, the complexity of the universe,
Mm-hmm.
and even in your field, the inherent complexity in your field, then you will have that attitude, that humble mindset that allows you to say, there must be something here that I'm not seeing. There must be something here for me to learn. There must be something here that I can uncover. And usually there just is. There are things that seem deep, like deep truths, formulas for scientific formulas that simply could not be challenged. When Newton started talking about the laws of gravitation, all the scientific community said, it's done. This guy's a super genius. He's explained it all. 300 years this edifice stood until a guy working in a watchmaking shop said, I got another idea. Of course, it was Einstein who came up with his own take on this and transformed the space. So what we thought we knew hundreds of years ago went by, and scientists realized that that's a limited explanation. And then even Einstein, when he heard quantum mechanics, quantum theory, no, I don't like that one either. That doesn't make sense to me. And again, the science continues to grow. So that's the mindset chess players have, and that's the mindset I think every elite performer should have, is that your field isn't done. 400 years from now, what we think is excellent, they're going to look at as childish. That's going to be basic. Humanity keeps building on itself and on the previous generations. So you are a baby, maybe less than a baby, right, to people 400 years from now. We just have to accept that. That's our place in the timeline. And that to me is the right attitude to keep. We're on this journey that continues to build and build, and more becomes revealed to us over time. So who are you to think that you've arrived at the finish line and that you're so excellent that there's nothing more to learn?
And those that think that they have arrived, those that essentially are closed off to learning, well, in that case, they never truly reach that upper echelon. Would you agree?
It's an interesting question. What is the upper echelon? Right? Like, you become the best in the world. All right, let's say that's the upper echelon. I am the best in the world. I have Magnus Carlsen, who's the world chess champion, who was the world chess champion, but the number one rated player in the world, and maybe the greatest player in history. Mm-hmm. Now imagine Magnus Carlsen playing against a computer. Now, 30 years ago, he would have crushed it. But Kasparov lost to Deep Blue in 1997. Kasparov was the then world champion, lost to Deep Blue, and that changed everything. And now this generation realizes, okay, the computers are better than us at chess. But they're not just better, they're much better at us, much better than us. My phone, I could start with my phone, and I start playing Magnus, and Magnus is in trouble. My app on my phone is beating the world chess champion. So that means that he's got tons to learn still. Performance issues, like how are we going to figure out how to beat these computers because they're just way better than us. And so what is upper echelon in chess? The computers are currently upper echelon. But guess what? My phone doesn't stand a chance against some big mainframe supercomputers. And those supercomputers don't stand a chance with the quantum computing that's coming fast that's going to make them look like children, right? So what's upper echelon? This upper echelon, it's a false marker. It's upper echelon amongst us humans. Okay, if you want to start with that, like I'm just going to be better than all the humans. All right, that's a standard. That's a great standard. That standard makes you a lot of money, right? But recognize that it's a limited standard. It's this constrained view we have of the world that we're competing against humans. That's really the race. And so I want to get into the level where I am performing best among humans or being the upper echelons among fellow humans. And when you think of it that way, like we're always learning, right? We're always growing. We're never really that great. We're just bet. I know it sounds a little depressing. Like, no, I'm pretty good. Yeah, you're pretty good. But if you had a race with a cheetah, you suck. Like, get over yourself. Usain Bolt races a cheetah. Maybe no, he's gonna get run down. It's gonna be pretty fast. So have the right attitude. Just have the right attitude and keep growing every day.
Hmm.
Just keep growing every day. That's to me what real upper echelon thinking is the person who says, today I'm going to be better than yesterday. My only race is against yesterday's self.
Hmm. Yeah, I like that. Let's talk about mental toughness. And you say that this is a requirement, right, for maintaining focus throughout the game. And these are games that can last, I assume, hours upon hours. And focus often dips when you're ahead, which is sort of interesting. And the tables can turn very quickly. And so this is why momentum is often an illusion when playing against the very, very best, because your lowest concentration is often the time when you actually got the biggest advantage on the board, given how important, and it makes complete sense. You sort of let your guard down, if you will. So how do you maintain your focus and concentration for so many hours? Is there training involved? Is it a mindset? What do you do so you don't ease up on the gas, so to speak, and let someone turn the tables on you?
There are a couple of things. You mentioned mindset, and mindset is critical. How hungry are you when you have a lead? Because our sloth brain kicks in. I mean, you just get
Sure.
complacent so easily. You see it. People are paid. I'm going to go back to basketball. They're being paid millions of dollars, these players. You see a team up 25 points, 20, 25 points. How many times do we see that lead get blown? You're staring at these, but you go, wait, you got a 25-point lead and you relaxed? You're being paid millions of dollars. All your fans are watching, and you relaxed and let the other team come back. And by the way, not just it just doesn't happen against elite teams. It's worse if you're beating a so-called bad team,
Hmm.
right? If you're the number one team and you're up 20 points against a bottom basement dweller, it's like, oh, well, yeah, because they suck. So we're just going to beat them. And then you see the performance. The performance is less. You see the players, it's kind of like relax. They start going through the motions until all of a sudden the other team that's playing their tails off, because they're professional players after all, suddenly cut it to 6 points. And what happened? Let's get it back again. And we know how hard it is to re-rev the engine.
Mm-hmm.
So experience should tell you to have the right mindset. Experience, if you've watched competitions of all types, it's not just basketball, all across the sports spectrum, tells you it is easy to get lazy when you're leading, and it's hard to re-rev that engine to make you go in a positive direction, especially when your opponent is getting super confident, uber confident now that they're coming back. So one is a mental attitude, but what specific things can we do? Well, first of all, one of the best things that sports has that chess players don't is a coach on the sidelines.
Hmm.
I'm a big Nick fan, being a New Yorker. And Tom Thibodeau is one of those great coaches that he sees the shift starting just a little bit. Timeout. We're stopping it right here. So someone who is watching on the side is huge. Somebody you can trust, who's seeing it happen and is going to make it stop in its tracks. I'm going to warn you, hey, it's happening right now, for you to say, oh, okay, sorry, I lost focus. But in a lot of situations, particularly when we're playing chess, we don't have a sideline coach. We have to do it ourselves. So we have to perform this self-coaching. And what happens is that it's all happening in your head. So sometimes I'm playing a game, I'm starting to win, and I'll say, oh, I'm crushing this guy. This is over. Man, what am I gonna have for dinner later?
Mm-hmm.
What, oh, are the Knicks playing tonight? Oh yeah, they're in the playoffs now. I'm feeling good. Jalen
Right,
Brunson's
right.
kid. Right. And then once that starts, I start losing that little bit of focus, and I start thinking about the game. I go, whoa, what am I thinking about? Whoa, get back to the game. Get out of that. Get back to the game. So there's perpetual conversation going on
Hmm.
that I'm tracking. I have to track myself. One of the hardest things to do is to track yourself. It's like having, a wrist monitor on and checking your heart rate and pulse and everything else. We have to do that ourselves. And we have to learn to consistently be our own barometers. And Another thing is in the moment to count breaths.
Hmm.
So breathing, but actually counting the breaths. So it's not my move, it's my opponent's move. I've looked at the board, I figured I know pretty much what's going on. A great exercise in that moment is to just start counting breaths. Breathe deep, that's one. Exhale, come back, that's two. And just do that. It makes you calm down, it makes you feel better, but it also gives you something to log on to so that you're not, again, fantasizing about the Knicks winning the championship or what you're going to be eating for dinner or
Hmm.
whatever else. So that's really, to me, having a coach, a lot of self-talk, and then specific breathing exercises, counting breaths are the things that I think that I used that were very effective, but others may have their own. And it's really all about bringing yourself back to focus. Nobody stays focused the entire time. Nobody stays focused the entire time, but it's making sure that you have methods that when you lose focus, you know exactly what you're going to do to bring yourself back. That's the real key.
Well, you also mentioned, I mean, look, you're not always going to win the games, of course, and you talk about the value of failure and how it gives us an opportunity to learn from mistakes. So, was curious when you would play and lose, would you go back and study your games and dissect all the moves you made to understand what went wrong? Is that how you do it?
Now, how I do it all, everybody does it. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm here, you talk, I go, yeah, that's chess right there, right? That's what we do. We even have a thing called postmortems, where after a game, the two players who played, because
Hmm.
we record the moves, so you can redo the game. If we also remember the game, but we also record them just so that we can make sure we have an accurate record of the game itself. And then you go over the moves and you say, so what do you think I should have done here? What was wrong here? And that way, the actual competitors teach each other about what ideas may help them to improve for the next time. So that's just standard operating procedure. And if I don't do it with my opponent, I go back and do it with a coach. If I don't do it with a coach, nowadays you can just do it with a computer. You put the moves in the computer, and the computer says, "Hey, dummy, you could have played this move." You're like, "Oh,
Well, I was going to ask you, would these more often be strategic flaws or mental mistakes?
they're all of the above." All of the above. Your mistakes are fall into different categories,
Hmm.
whether it's strategic, whether it's tactical, whether it's mental. Those are patterns that you want to unearth. And so, one of the techniques that I tell people
Hmm.
is categorize your mistakes. Most people, if you ask a big room, what are the type of mistakes that you make under certain circumstances? Most people haven't categorized those mistakes. If you made a mistake today, did you make a record of it? What was the mistake that I made? Make a record. Why did I make this mistake? Make a record of it. Like put it somewhere and tag it. What was the nature of my mistake? Was it mental? Was it strategic? Was it tactical? Right? Was it distraction? That happens all the time. I'm trying to play online and something happens in the room and I look away and I come back and I just blunder. Distraction, right? If you got kids, you know you're going to be distracted. But usually when people make mistakes, what they do is they kick themselves and they say, that was stupid. And they ignore the reason behind the mistake. They don't categorize it. They don't say time of day, right? State of mind, hunger level, like hunger, famished or not, uh, thirst levels. People don't categorize their mistakes. And then what happens when you categorize your mistakes is a year from now, you can look back on the year and say, what is the actual specific nature of my mistakes? What are the ones that are really the big ones that I saw repeat themselves? Chess players track that stuff. That's the stuff we track. We track our mistakes. And by tracking your mistakes, you can say, this is what I need to fix. This is what I need to address. Instead of the attitude of, no, rip it up, forget it, I won't do that again. No, track it so you can see it. You can identify why it happens, and then you'll be able to address it most effectively.
It sort of comes back to this intuition. I mean, you've got to have really, really good pattern recognition because when you're looking at, oh, I made this error or that error when the board looked like this, but back to your earlier point, there are, once you get to the game where you're halfway through the game, there are hundreds of billions of possible moves. So you're probably never going to see that exact situation with all those pieces exactly as they're set up. So you've got to be able to sort of extrapolate, right? Conceptualize off of, I assume, when you're looking at the mistakes and how to preempt them next time around.
Yes, pattern recognition is huge. To spot those kinds of chess
Hmm.
specific patterns is very huge. No question about it. And that's where we get to what I call the tactical mistakes. There's a pattern I didn't know. Oh, that exists. And those become less and less the better and better you get. But I don't think, for me, something you don't know is not necessarily a mistake that you suffer from, that you lose sleep over. Right? I didn't know that. Right? What?
Hmm.
How could I just guessed at it or necessarily figured it out? I didn't know it. I'm not going to lose sleep over that. The mistake I'm going to lose sleep over is what I do know. The error, not in the space of ignorance, but in the
Hmm.
space of supposed competence. And so I write, for example, in the book about an example against his grandmaster. I had a game against Grandmaster Robert Byrne, and I was not yet even an international master, right? Which is the level below grandmaster. So for me to be playing as a grandmaster, this is a big deal. And I was eating his lunch. Like I just right out the gates, he made a big mistake, and I was all over him. And what did I do? I got cocky. I was a young, cocky kid. I got up from the board. I started walking around and I started dreaming about the fact that this game is going to be published for all to see in chess magazines. That's literally what I thought. A friend of mine,
Yeah.
uh, Natasha is her name. I can see the picture right now. This was 1988. Can you imagine? I still remember vividly. She came up to me and she's looking at me like, "What's going on?" And I said, "I am crushing him, and this game is going to get published." And she looked at me. She went over to the board. She saw that I was crushing him, and she went back to her board. So I'm thinking this is cocky attitude. I go back to the board. He makes a move. I sit down, and I bang out the next move, and it's a mistake. And the game turns around, and I'm in a dogfight, and we're struggling. And he's got the advantage now, and it's another 30 moves before it's an even position. Like it's going to be a draw. I
Hmm.
survived, and right at that moment, I offered him a draw, but he wanted to beat me badly, so he declined. He's like, "No," and he immediately makes a mistake, and I win his queen, and he has to give up. Now, two things there. First of all, I did that all the time. My pattern was not that I didn't see moves. It was that I was arrogant. It was a personal failing. In the middle of games when I'm winning, I start getting super cocky. It's like I'm back in Brooklyn trash talking you and saying, "Oh, I'm gonna kick your ass. You got no chance now. It's over," right? That doesn't work at the elite level. You've got to stay humble and focused. And it's so easy to say, yeah, of course you do. But your personal failings will come at those moments. And my personal failing is different from somebody else's personal failing. Somebody else, it may be that in that moment of gain, they get conservative. When they need to push harder, they back up and say, "No, no, no, I've got the gain. I gotta stay right here. Let me just uh, massage this advantage and go down to the finish line." Yeah, but that massage might make it easier for your opponent to come back
Hmm.
instead of just knocking them out. So everybody has their own personal failing, and they have to see the pattern that they fall into in that moment. Now, what was Burns? Burns was ego. This is a snot-nosed kid. Who do you think he is? He's beating on me, right? I'm going to kill him. Even though he could plainly see the game is equal. There's neither one of us is supposed to win. But he just couldn't. He just wanted to beat me still. And so he declined my draw offer and then immediately blundered. And then I won. So you
Hmm.
see that this what you have to overcome personally can often be more important, that those character traits more important than actual learnings themselves of individualized patterns that help you to play the game better.
Well, you come up with this concept. I think it's your concept, or it certainly was new for me. Retrograde analysis.
Oh, it ain't mine.
It's
No.
not yours. Okay, so I never heard of this before. I thought it was really interesting. It essentially it's envisioning a future state and then working backwards. I think of it like reverse engineering. So how does that work in chess? How do you use that to improve your game?
So a large piece of chess is desired states, right? This is a desirable state. This is the end game that I want to
Hmm.
get to.
Hmm.
And so with years of learning and experience and the like, you know what are favorable end games. Like this is an outcome that would be great. If I could have my pieces like that, then this would be fantastic. So you're constantly tracking situations where you can say, it's not from where I am now to try to work out what happens next, but to see where I am now and to note that, hey, there's a possible end game here that I could get to. And what does that look like? And if I know what that looks like, now I have to bridge the two somehow. And I can do it by calculating forward, which is traditional, or I can do it by wondering, but what would it look like before I got to that end game? And what would it look like before that? And by working together, it's not separate, like retrograde analysis is its own individual tool and then it's isolated as such. It's by working both angles together, going forwards and going backwards from the goal to here and from here to the goal, that you are able to come up with the ideas and come up with some nice solutions.
Hmm.
The idea I first learned in a book, The Chess Mysteries of Sherlock Holmes, by a gentleman, mathematician named Raymond Smullyan. He was also a puzzle creator. And it's just one of those great ideas. In the quote that I have in the book that I absolutely adore is that in order to know the past, sometimes you have to know the future.
Hmm.
And usually we do the reverse. Like in order to know the future, you should study the past. But this idea was so brilliant, like mind blowing. And he gave a lot of chess puzzles just for you to be able to do that. But it happens so often in life. I mean, there are many examples. I use the most basic example is pregnancy,
Hmm.
right? If a woman becomes pregnant today, she won't know for weeks, right? She won't know until the signs are showing or until she's built up enough hormones in her body for pregnancy tests to show it. If a star in the sky exploded, well, stars have exploded. We don't know potentially for millions of years, right? Millions of years to know an event that happened and it's all over the night sky because the light
Hmm.
that's reaching us obviously is from a long time ago. So we won't know for years and years something that happened in the past, and we have no way of knowing until some future occurrence alerts us to it. I talked about it with my mother. I couldn't understand the sacrifice of my mother and get over those abandonment issues until 25 years later when I had my own child. That was the triggering event that made me go back in time and say, hold on a second, that's an issue for me. And then address it with my mother and then have a chance to actually overcome it. So constantly, I think it's a very powerful tool to recognize that the future holds a lot of the answers that you don't know currently. But many times you can even start to think about those futures and use that thought experiment as a way to address things that are happening right now.
Hmm. Well, on your quest to become this grandmaster, this goal you had, there was some tournament you're in where you made some mistake. And someone, I think it was another grandmaster, you weren't a grandmaster, of course, at the time, they were watching you. They came over and gave you advice. And they said to become a grandmaster, you must first be a grandmaster. So simple, yet so profound. And I think you took the advice to heart. So it sounds like maybe this was an inflection point for you on this quest.
One of the greatest words that were ever said to me, one of the greatest pieces of advice. It's so profound. And it came at a time when I was playing a game where there was an option. The option was to capture a piece that was an important piece, a rook, the second most powerful piece on the chessboard. I could capture the rook with my bishop, which is worse than a rook, or I could take a lowly pawn. Like, just, you get it. So take this lowly pawn. And I had a choice. And in the moment, if I had won that game, I would have gained enough points to get the Grandmaster title. The right move was to take the pawn, but unfortunately, I took the rook, blew all my advantage. Game turned, lost the game. I was devastated. And that's when Shabalov, Grandmaster Shabalov, said those words to me. And, it was like some Yoda
Hmm.
stuff, what? Feel the force, right? But what he was saying to me was, you don't achieve a goal by achieving it. You achieve a goal long before. You have to be prepared in that state of preparation, not just from a chess standpoint, but most importantly, from a mental standpoint. That when that option comes to be greedy and grab the most delicious looking thing, or stay cool, calm, and keep all your gains, you'll have that mindset. You'll be so cool, calm, and collected in the moment that you'll say, it's cool. Things are going to work out. You'll come in as a grandmaster. You only prove it by playing the game. In the end, the proof is in you performing for others to see, but it's in the quiet of your own study, of the physical training that you do, in terms of the psychological training that you explore. All those things that you do beforehand get you ready for those critical moments that happen in battle. And that was so important for me to understand, that it was indeed a personal failing. It was, I'm going after the points. It was chasing the result that had my mind going in the wrong direction and had me making the bad decision when the time came. I didn't have to prove it at the board. I mean, in the end, so that I could get the official certificate, the International Chess Federation awards you the title. But I had to be the grandmaster walking to that board. I had to be that good already and know that I was that good. And he just, I understood to go back, do the work, prepare myself, get ready for that moment, uh, be that in the quiet of my own study where nobody was watching. And then when it came time to perform, I was just ready. And when I had that opportunity again, that's exactly what happened. I had a choice between giving away material, which chess players don't want to give away anything, or keeping it. And in that moment, I was free and I said, you can have it. I'm just playing chess. And that won me the game that gave me the title.
Very interesting. I think somewhere along the way you also took up Aikido and meditation. What did those practices do to help elevate your game? How did those factor in?
Well, meditation is pretty straightforward because calming yourself mentally is great for whatever you do,
Hmm.
right? Also, it helps you to stay focused. When I talk about the breath, focus on the breath. That's a form of meditation. But Aikido was really special. And
Hmm.
Aikido was the thing that literally took me over the top, because the main concept behind Aikido is using your opponent's energy against them. That's the main concept, that you're not the one using the force or applying the force. You're just going to use your opponent's energy against them. And on the chessboard, I was the kind of kid or kind of player grew up where aggression was the right attitude. Like, you just attack,
Hmm.
just throw all your pieces at your opponent. You might have to sacrifice some of them. Just go after the king, rip all the defenses, checkmate, and get published in the magazine, right? But when I did that against grandmasters, my attack would come too quickly. My pieces that seemed like they were super aggressive would be slightly off center. There'd be a little bit of miscoordination because I hadn't prepared my attack sufficiently. It's like the desire to attack, other and not the conditions that made it right to attack. And I realized I was like missing the mark constantly. It's that person who has that big, the boxer who has the big punch, right?
Hmm.
And you do that big punch, and you're gonna hit, and the guy moves slightly out the way, and you miss. And now, not only have you missed, you're completely off balance. You're fully exposed, and here comes the left hook that just slaps you in the face. It just boom, nails you. That's what I was doing on the chessboard.
Hmm.
And I didn't understand it because, yeah, you know, I grew up in Brownsville. Mike Tyson's from Brownsville, and that's where I grew up. Like you hit him hard, hit him fast, and that's what it was on the chessboard. So just like if you look at Mike Tyson, he had that ability to bob and weave. Like that's what he did. You, we all see his flurry of punches, but his real skill was his ability to duck from bigger guys who would try to land on him, and he'd just go right under the punch, and they'd be off center, and boom, he'd hit him. That's what I learned from Aikido. I didn't do it in boxing because I didn't want to get my face punched in. Aikido really focuses on that 100%. 100%. How do you use somebody's energy against them? And not only using their energy, because that sounds a bit abstract, but actually hyper accelerating the force, the direction in which they were going, right? So that means if somebody punches, you're not trying to duck and then hit them. Mm-hmm. You're trying to take the arm that punched, catch it, and take that force in the same direction that it's going in. Which means if I can't pull my arm back because my arm is still going in the direction that I punched, then I'm going to fall because of my own force, right? I'm going to go in the direction of this punch, but I can't keep my feet under me because I punched so hard. And if we can just accelerate that punch, that person is bound to fall. They're going to spin actually, right? You're going to look stupid because you just made this big punch and your foundation isn't set because we pulled you off of it. So that idea was so deep. Let me tell you, when I actually realized it while I was playing chess, again, from something that I was doing, and I understood martial arts because my siblings were martial artists, and I studied Bruce Lee and all that, just for the mental side. When I realized it, I said, I need to get it in my body. I need to understand this, not just abstractly. I need to understand in my body. So that's why I took up Aikido, because I wanted to understand it on a physical level, which I then translated into a mental application on the chessboard.
Anything else that you had to change about either the game you were playing or you yourself, work you had to do on yourself to get to the point where you could then be the grandmaster, as you put it?
Absolutely. I mentioned this thing about arrogance. I also had this weakness that really was related to, probably part of it was my mother not being around, but certainly it was how people around me reacted when I was showing how smart I was as a kid. Because when you're a smart kid, what happens? People around you say, "Oh, you're really smart. What a bright person." That's food for you, the food for the ego. You feel good. You want to keep showing your parents and those around you that you're smart. So I would play chess that way. I would play chess not to win the game, but to win in style. I want to show how brilliant I was. And in chess, there are different ways to win. I mean, one is like beautifully, and you attack somebody, you sacrifice all the pieces, you rip the king apart, and it's a game that's remembered forever. But there's also another way to win, which is the slow grind. You just build up your position. You might have to trade a couple of pieces. You play it a little safe. Okay, you build up a little bit more. And slowly but surely, you push your opponent into a corner. They got no moves. And then, all right, maybe I trade down some more. And then I'll win some late end game. Nobody's cheering for those. Like, come on, man. What is that? I'm not interested in that kind of win. That doesn't make me look good. And I will tell you, it sounds ridiculous, but it sounds ridiculous to me now, but I get it why it was. But I always wanted to win the other way. I gave value to this way that made me look good. It was the little boy who wanted his mom to say, "That's so cool, honey. That's beautiful. I love you." And to overcome that was so hard. I can't tell you. Just even now, I create these brilliant puzzles. Today, I understand the motivation and a bit more mature now. But I create these great puzzles for people to solve in chess. And part of it is, again, for people to say, "Wow, that was genius, Maurice. You created that." It's hard to fully overcome something like that. But it is very possible to be aware of it and deal with it.
And you overcome that just with time and maturity and seasoning, or was it some kind of mental switch that one day you woke up and you said, I'm gonna care about something different than I've cared about it in the past"?
An alcoholic is all once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. Right? That's what Alcoholic Anonymous. I've never been an alcoholic, but I understand that to be the case.
Yeah.
I don't think you get over these things. I think you manage them. You understand them. You know the motivations behind them. You don't have to be fully cured in order to perform well. You just have to manage those demons, and we all have them. And so everyone who wants to perform at an elite level should recognize they don't have to be perfect in order to do so. It's in the effort, it's in the conversation, it's in the humility, it's in that approach that will allow you to have a deeper understanding, because your journey will teach you more than arriving at any destination will.
We'll wrap with this. The name of the podcast here, The Art of Excellence. I don't know if you listen to any of the other interviews, but I always end it with asking the guest to define that word excellence. What's it mean to you?
Excellence for me is improving every single day. It's being humble enough, maintaining beginner's mind, knowing that you don't know everything and you never will. Thank goodness. I would hate to know everything about chess. I would literally hate to just be sitting here going, I know it all, because then there'd be nothing left to explore. It would be done. So excellence is improving every single day.
I like it. So I'm 55. If I start chess now and I improve every day, how old am I when I get to Grandmaster? I'm guessing it's the next
Don't worry
life.
about the destination. Don't worry about the destination.
It's the journey.
It's the journey.
I love it. Maurice, I love the journey of this interview. I know there's so much more we could have talked about, but I love the book. It was such a metaphor for life. I play the game very casually. I never realized how much one can extrapolate from a board game of moving, knights and rooks and all this to life. And I loved it. So thank you for spending time with me and my audience. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you really so much for those words, and thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, here's my ask of you. First, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the show. You can find it on iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Second, tell a friend. Better yet, share it with all your friends and contacts on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Honestly, wherever you hang out online is fine with me. Please leave me a review if you could on iTunes or Spotify or both. The reviews really do help. And finally, try to find one takeaway from this episode that you can apply to your own life. Commit to trying something, anything. As the saying goes, no harm in trying. I leave you with this one question. How do you define the word excellence?